Every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., Maya stepped through the glass doors of Sterling Creative Agency, her worn black flats clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The security guard, Mr. Peterson, would nod and smile, but most days she was invisible to everyone else rushing past her with their expensive coffee cups and designer handbags. Maya had been working at Sterling for 3 years now, sitting at the same small desk tucked away in the corner of the open office space. Her desk was neat and organized, with color-coded folders and a small plant that she watered every Tuesday. While other employees had large monitors and ergonomic chairs, Maya made do with an older computer and a chair that squeaked whenever she leaned back. The marketing agency was buzzing with creative energy. Colorful posters covered the walls, showing off successful campaigns for big brands. The conference rooms had names like Innovation Station and Creative Cave, and the break room was stocked with fancy snacks and 3 different types of coffee machines. It was the kind of place that looked amazing on their website, attracting young professionals who dreamed of working in advertising. But Maya's reality was different. She was the administrative assistant, which meant she did all the work that nobody else wanted to do. She scheduled meetings, organized files, ordered supplies, and handled the endless stream of small tasks that kept the office running smoothly. When the coffee machine broke down, Maya called the repair company. When someone needed travel arrangements, Maya booked the flights. When important documents went missing, Maya somehow always knew exactly where to find them. Her supervisor, Jennifer, was a busy woman who managed multiple departments. Jennifer was kind enough, but she rarely had time for long conversations. Their interactions were mostly quick check-ins about deadlines and task lists. Maya, can you handle the Johnson account files? Or, Maya, the presentation room needs to be set up for tomorrow's meeting. Maya would nod and smile, making mental notes of everything that needed to be done. The creative team worked in a different world entirely. They had brainstorming sessions in the fancy conference rooms, sketching ideas on whiteboards and discussing concepts that Maya only heard fragments of as she walked by. They talked about brand positioning and target demographics, using words that sounded important and exciting. Maya found herself listening carefully to these conversations. Even though she was supposed to be focused on her own tasks during her lunch breaks, Maya would often eat at her desk while reading marketing blogs and industry articles on her phone. She had always been curious about how advertising worked, how companies decided what messages to send to customers, and how creative campaigns came together. She had studied business administration at the local community college, taking night classes while working at a retail store to pay for her education. Her professors had been encouraging, telling her she had good instincts for understanding customer needs and market trends, but at Sterling, Maya felt like she was trapped behind an invisible wall. The creative meetings happened without her. The strategy sessions were for senior staff only. When she occasionally shared an idea or observation, people would smile politely and change the subject. It wasn't that anyone was mean to her. They just didn't see her as someone who could contribute to the creative process. Maya had tried several times to talk to Jennifer about moving into a different role. She had prepared carefully for these conversations, researching job openings within the company and thinking about how her skills could transfer to other departments. But each time, Jennifer would listen patiently and then explain that Maya was so valuable in her current position. "We really need someone reliable handling the administrative work," Jennifer would say. "You're so good at it, and it's such an important part of what we do here." The rejection always stung, but Maya tried not to let it show. She would thank Jennifer for her time and go back to her desk, filing away her disappointment along with the invoices and contracts that crossed her desk every day. Sometimes she wondered if she should look for a job at a different company, but she had bills to pay and couldn't afford to be unemployed while searching for something new. Despite feeling overlooked, Maya genuinely cared about the work being done at Sterling. She took pride in making sure everything ran smoothly, even if no one noticed her efforts. When the team was rushing to meet a deadline, Maya would stay late to help with printing and organizing materials. When a client visited the office, Maya made sure the conference room was perfectly set up and that fresh coffee was ready. She paid attention to details that others missed, like remembering that one important client preferred decaf coffee and that another was allergic to nuts. Over time, Maya had developed an unusual understanding of the agency's clients and their needs. Because she handled so much of the paperwork and correspondence, she saw patterns that others missed. She noticed which strategies worked and which ones failed. She read through client feedback and saw what made customers happy or frustrated. She understood the business side of creativity in a way that few people at the agency did. Maya also had a talent for solving problems quietly. When the printer broke down before a big presentation, she found a backup solution. When a client's contact information was wrong in the system, she tracked down the correct details. When team members couldn't find important files, Maya somehow always knew where they were stored. She had become the unofficial guardian of the agency's organizational memory, but recognition for these contributions never came. During company meetings, the creative directors would present their successful campaigns and receive applause. Account executives would share stories about winning new clients and get congratulations from management. Maya would sit in the back of the room, taking notes and managing the presentation technology. Invisible to most of the people celebrating around her, the hardest part was watching opportunities pass by. Maya would see job postings for marketing coordinator or junior account executive positions, roles that seemed perfect for someone with her skills and knowledge. But HR would always explain that these positions required specific experience that Maya didn't have on paper. It was a frustrating cycle. She couldn't get the experience without the opportunity, but she couldn't get the opportunity without the experience. Still, Maya refused to become bitter. She genuinely liked many of her coworkers and believed in the work the agency was doing. She saw how their campaigns helped businesses grow and how creative solutions could solve real problems for clients. She wanted to be part of that process, not just supporting it from the sidelines. As her third anniversary at Sterling approached, Maya found herself at a crossroads. She could continue doing the same work, hoping that someone would eventually notice her potential, or she could find the courage to make a change. Little did she know that an unexpected opportunity was about to test everything she had learned during her years of quiet observation and careful preparation. The stage was set for a moment that would change not just Maya's career, but her entire understanding of her own capabilities. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places, and Maya was about to discover that all those years of being overlooked had been preparing her for something much bigger than she had ever imagined. While Maya worked quietly in her corner, the undisputed star of Sterling Creative Agency was Olivia Kane. Everyone knew Olivia's name from the moment she walked into the building 2 years ago. She had graduated from one of those fancy business schools that people whispered about in impressed tones, and her resume was filled with internships at companies that most people only dreamed of working for. Olivia's office was in the prime location on the 3rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city skyline. Her desk was a sleek glass surface, always perfectly organized with just the right amount of controlled chaos to look creative but professional. 2 large monitors displayed colorful presentations and complex spreadsheets, while an expensive coffee machine hummed quietly in the corner. The walls were decorated with framed certificates and awards, along with photos of Olivia shaking hands with important-looking people at industry events. From her first day at Sterling, Olivia had impressed everyone with her confidence and polished presentation skills. She had a way of walking into a room and immediately commanding attention. Her voice was clear and authoritative, and she never seemed to stumble over words or appear nervous, even when presenting to the most demanding clients. She wore perfectly tailored suits that probably cost more than Maya made in a month, and her hair was always styled in a way that looked effortless but must have taken considerable time and money to achieve. The senior partners at Sterling quickly recognized Olivia's potential. Within 6 months of joining the company, she had been promoted to senior account executive. Within a year, she was leading presentations for their biggest clients. The company's marketing materials featured photos of Olivia at work, and her success stories were highlighted in the company newsletter. She had become the face of Sterling's young, dynamic approach to advertising. Olivia's specialty was winning new business. She had a talent for understanding what potential clients wanted to hear and presenting ideas in ways that made them excited about working with Sterling. Her presentations were masterpieces of persuasion, with stunning visuals and compelling narratives that made complex marketing strategies seem simple and inevitable. She used phrases like synergistic brand positioning and integrated digital ecosystems with the confidence of someone who truly understood what these terms meant, but Olivia's relationship with the support staff was complicated. She wasn't deliberately cruel, but she had a way of treating people like Maya as if they were part of the office furniture. When she needed something done, she would speak quickly and assume that everyone understood exactly what she wanted. She never said please or thank you, not because she was trying to be rude, but because it simply didn't occur to her that these interactions mattered. Maya had countless interactions with Olivia that followed the same pattern. Olivia would appear at Maya's desk, usually while talking on her phone or checking emails on her tablet, and drop off a stack of documents or fire off a rapid list of tasks. "I need these copied and bound by tomorrow morning," she might say, barely glancing up from her screen. "And call the Morrison Group to confirm the meeting time. Also, the presentation room needs to be set up for Thursday with the new projector system." Then Olivia would walk away, her heels clicking confidently across the floor, leaving Maya to figure out the details. Maya had learned to ask clarifying questions quickly before Olivia disappeared into another meeting or phone call. How many copies? What type of binding? Which Morrison Group contact? What time on Thursday? But often Olivia was already gone, and Maya would have to piece together the requirements from context clues and her own knowledge of ongoing projects. The most frustrating part was that Olivia seemed to assume that Maya had no understanding of the actual work being done. She would hand over presentation materials as if Maya were simply a copying machine, never explaining the context or asking for input. Maya would carefully review the documents to make sure everything was correct, sometimes catching errors or inconsistencies that Olivia had missed. But when Maya pointed these out, Olivia would fix them quickly and move on without acknowledgement. Maya had noticed that Olivia's presentations, while visually impressive, sometimes missed important details about client needs or market conditions. Because Maya handled so much of the correspondence and filing, she often had a broader view of client relationships than individual account executives realized. She had seen patterns in client feedback that suggested some of Olivia's strategies weren't as effective as they appeared, but there was no appropriate way for Maya to share these observations with someone who clearly didn't value her input. The upcoming Meridian Industries presentation was Olivia's biggest opportunity yet. Meridian was a manufacturing company looking to completely overhaul their marketing approach, and they represented a potential $1 million contract that could transform Sterling's business. The company had been courting Meridian for months, with multiple meetings and proposal drafts. Landing this client would be a career-defining moment for whoever managed the account. Olivia had been preparing for this presentation for weeks, working long hours and holding strategy sessions with the senior creative team. Maya had been assigned to handle all the logistics and administrative support, which meant she had access to every version of the presentation, every piece of research, and every internal discussion about strategy. She had organized meeting notes, scheduled conference calls, and prepared materials for brainstorming sessions. During this preparation period, Maya had developed an unusually deep understanding of Meridian's business and challenges. She had read through their annual reports, studied their current marketing materials, and researched their competitors. She had also noticed some important information that seemed to be missing from Olivia's presentation. Recent news articles and industry reports suggested that Meridian was facing specific challenges that Sterling's proposed strategy didn't directly address. Maya had considered mentioning these observations to Olivia, but she wasn't sure how to bring them up without seeming like she was overstepping her role. On several occasions, she had started to speak up during meetings, but the conversation would move quickly to other topics, and the moment would pass. Maya told herself that surely Olivia and her team had access to the same information and had made deliberate choices about what to include in their presentation. The office buzz around the Meridian presentation was intense. People would stop by Olivia's office to offer encouragement or ask about progress. The senior partners were clearly invested in the outcome, and everyone understood that success with Meridian could lead to more high-profile opportunities for the entire agency. Olivia seemed to thrive under this pressure, becoming even more focused and confident as the presentation date approached. Maya watched this process with mixed feelings. She was genuinely excited about the possibility of Sterling winning such an important client, and she respected Olivia's talent and dedication. But she also felt frustrated by her own invisibility in the process. Maya had contributed countless hours to making the presentation possible, yet she knew that if Sterling won the Meridian account, the credit would go entirely to Olivia and the senior team members. As the presentation date grew closer, Maya found herself thinking more and more about the gaps she had noticed in the research and strategy. She had prepared her own notes about Meridian's challenges and potential solutions, initially just to help her understand the project better. But gradually, these notes had evolved into a comprehensive analysis that went beyond what she had seen. In Olivia's materials, Maya kept these observations to herself, filed away in a folder on her computer that she told herself she would probably never use. After all, she was just the administrative assistant. Her job was to support the presentation, not to question the strategy developed by people with much more experience and authority than she had. But sometimes, late at night when she was organizing files or preparing materials for the next day, Maya would wonder what might happen if the presentation didn't go as planned. What if Meridian asked questions that Olivia couldn't answer? What if they raised concerns that hadn't been anticipated? These thoughts made Maya nervous, not because she wanted Olivia to fail, but because she cared about Sterling's success and had invested so much effort in making the presentation possible. The stage was set for what everyone expected to be Olivia's greatest triumph. But as Maya had learned during her years of quiet observation, sometimes the most important moments come from the most unexpected places, and the best-laid plans can change in an instant. The morning of the Meridian presentation started like any other Tuesday, but by 8:15 a.m., Maya could sense something was wrong. Olivia's office light was still off, and her perfectly organized desk looked exactly the same as it had when she left the previous evening. Maya glanced at her watch and felt a small knot form in her stomach. Olivia was never late, especially not on such an important day. Maya had arrived at the office extra early to make sure everything was perfect for the presentation. She had double-checked the conference room setup, tested the projector system, and arranged fresh flowers on the table. The presentation materials were neatly stacked and ready. The catering was confirmed for lunch, and she had even prepared backup copies of everything in case something went wrong with the technology. Every detail had been carefully planned and executed. At 8:30 a.m., Maya's phone rang. The caller ID showed Olivia's number, and Maya felt a moment of relief. But when she answered, Olivia's voice sounded completely different from usual. Instead of her normal confident tone, she sounded weak and strained. "Maya, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to make it in today," Olivia said, pausing between words as if speaking was difficult. "I've been up all night with food poisoning. I can barely keep water down, let alone stand up for a presentation." Maya's heart sank. She looked across the office at the empty conference room that was supposed to host the most important presentation in Sterling's recent history. "Are you sure you can't make it? Maybe if you rest for a few more hours." "No, there's no way," Olivia interrupted, her voice getting weaker. "I've never felt this sick in my life. I think it was something I ate at that new restaurant last night. I'm so sorry, Maya. I know how much work you put into organizing everything." After hanging up, Maya sat at her desk in stunned silence. The Meridian executives were flying in from 3 different cities specifically for this 2 p.m. presentation. They had rearranged their schedules and invested considerable time and money in making this meeting happen. The contracts were ready to be signed, and everyone at Sterling had been talking about this opportunity for months. Maya immediately called Jennifer, her supervisor, who was in an early meeting with the senior partners. When Jennifer's phone went to voicemail, Maya sent an urgent text message. "Emergency, Olivia is very sick and can't make the Meridian presentation today. Please call me ASAP." Within minutes, Jennifer was rushing over to Maya's desk, her face pale with worry. "What exactly did she say? How sick is she? Is there any chance she could recover by this afternoon?" Maya explained the phone call, and Jennifer's expression grew more grim with each detail. "This is a disaster," Jennifer muttered, running her hands through her hair. "We've been working toward this presentation for months. The senior partners are going to be furious." By 9 a.m., word had spread throughout the office. Maya watched as small groups of employees gathered in hallways, whispering about the crisis. Some people seemed genuinely concerned about Olivia's health, while others appeared more worried about what this meant for the company's future. The Meridian contract represented more than just money. It was a chance for Sterling to establish itself as a major player in the industrial marketing sector. Jennifer called an emergency meeting for 9:30, and in the main conference room, Maya was asked to attend, along with all the senior staff and account executives. As people filed into the room, Maya noticed the tension in everyone's faces. This was the kind of crisis that could define careers and potentially change the direction of the entire company. David Sterling, the company's founder and CEO, stood at the head of the table looking more serious than Maya had ever seen him. He was usually an optimistic person who tried to find silver linings in difficult situations, but today his expression was grim. "I'm sure you've all heard about Olivia's situation," he began. "We have less than 5 hours to figure out how to handle the most important presentation in our company's history." The room erupted in suggestions and concerns. Robert, the creative director, proposed splitting the presentation among multiple team members, with each person handling their area of expertise. Lisa, another account executive, suggested trying to postpone the meeting, even though everyone knew that Meridian's executives had traveled specifically for this appointment. "We could try to do a video conference with Olivia from home," suggested Tom, a junior account executive. "Maybe if she takes some medication, she could at least participate virtually." David shook his head. "I just got off the phone with her. She can barely speak, let alone present to our biggest potential client. We need to face reality here." Maya sat quietly in the corner listening to the increasingly desperate suggestions. She watched as people who were normally confident and decisive struggled to find a solution. The problem wasn't just that Olivia was sick, it was that she had been the sole point person for this project. While other team members had contributed ideas and creative elements, Olivia had been the one who understood the complete strategy and could articulate how all the pieces fit together. "What about the presentation materials?" asked Jennifer. "Could someone else learn the content quickly enough to deliver it?" Robert flipped through the presentation slides on his tablet. "This is 60 slides of complex strategic analysis. It's not just about reading from a script. Whoever presents this needs to understand the reasoning behind every recommendation and be able to answer detailed questions about implementation." Maya felt her stomach tighten as she realized the full scope of the problem. She had seen how much preparation Olivia had put into this presentation. There were layers of research, competitive analysis, and strategic thinking that couldn't be quickly absorbed by someone else. The Meridian executives would be expecting a polished, professional presentation from someone who truly understood their business and challenges. As the meeting continued, Maya found herself thinking about all the work that had gone into preparing for this moment. She thought about the months of research, the countless hours of preparation, and the hopes that everyone at Sterling had invested in this opportunity. She also thought about the Meridian executives who were probably already traveling to the city, expecting to see a presentation that could help solve their marketing challenges. Maybe we should just be honest with them, suggested Lisa. We could explain the situation and ask if they'd be willing to reschedule. They might be understanding about a medical emergency. David considered this option, but his expression remained troubled. The problem is that Meridian is also considering proposals from 2 other agencies. If we postpone, we're essentially giving our competitors an extra week to refine their presentations, and we've already asked Meridian to adjust their schedules once before. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. Maya could see the disappointment and frustration in people's faces. This wasn't just about losing one potential client, it was about losing momentum and credibility in a competitive industry where reputation was everything. What about the research materials? Asked Jennifer. I know Maya has been organizing all the documents and correspondence. Maybe she could help someone else get up to speed quickly. All eyes turned to Maya, who felt her cheeks flush red. She had indeed been organizing and reviewing all the project materials, but she had never imagined that this knowledge would be relevant to the actual presentation. I have everything organized, she said quietly. All the research, client communications, competitive analysis. It's all filed and categorized. That's great, said Robert, but organizing materials is different from understanding strategy. We need someone who can think on their feet and respond to complex questions about market positioning and implementation timelines. Maya nodded, understanding the distinction. But as she sat there listening to the increasingly desperate conversation, she couldn't help but think about all the insights she had gained from reviewing those materials. She had noticed patterns and connections that might not be obvious to someone quickly skimming through the documents. She had identified potential concerns that Meridian might raise, and she had even developed her own ideas about how to address some of their specific challenges, but Maya also knew her place in the company hierarchy. She was the administrative assistant, not a strategist or presenter. Her job was to support the people who made the important decisions, not to make those decisions herself. As the meeting continued around her, Maya struggled with the growing feeling that she might have something valuable to contribute. Even though she couldn't imagine how she could possibly step into Olivia's shoes. The clock on the conference room wall showed 10:15 a.m. in less than 4 hours. The Meridian executives would arrive expecting to see a presentation that could change both companies' futures. And at this moment, Sterling Creative Agency had no idea how they were going to deliver what they had promised. The emergency meeting had been going on for over an hour, and Maya could feel the desperation growing thicker in the room. She watched as David Sterling paced back and forth behind his chair, his usually calm demeanor completely shattered. The other executives were throwing out increasingly wild suggestions, each one more unrealistic than the last. What if we hire a professional presenter? Suggested Robert, though his voice lacked conviction. Someone who specializes in corporate presentations? In 4 hours? Jennifer replied, shaking her head. And how would they learn months of research and strategy in that time? Plus, the Meridian executives are expecting to meet with our team, not some stranger. Lisa was frantically typing on her laptop, trying to find contact information for other agencies that might be able to help. Maybe we could partner with Thompson Marketing for this one presentation. They've worked with industrial clients before, but David quickly shot down this idea too. That would be professional suicide. We'd be admitting that we can't handle our own clients. Word would get around the industry within days. Maya sat quietly in her corner chair, watching the clock on. The wall ticked closer to noon. The Meridian executives were probably already at the airport, boarding their flights to the city. In her mind, she could picture them discussing what they hoped to learn from Sterling's presentation, completely unaware of the chaos happening in the conference room. Tom, the junior account executive who had been relatively quiet during the meeting, suddenly spoke up. You know, he said with a slightly nervous laugh, Maya probably knows more about this presentation than anyone else in the room right now. She's been organizing all of Olivia's materials for weeks. The comment was meant to be lighthearted, maybe even a little joking, but it landed in the room like a stone dropping into still water. Several people turned to look at Maya, and she felt her face growing hot with embarrassment. "That's actually not a bad point," said Jennifer, though her tone suggested she was grasping at straws. "Maya, you've been handling all the documentation and correspondence. Do you think you could help someone else get up to speed quickly?" Before Maya could respond, Robert let out a short laugh that wasn't entirely kind. "Come on, Jennifer. Maya's great at organizing files and scheduling meetings, but this is $1 million presentation. We're talking about strategic marketing analysis, not filing documents alphabetically." The comment stung, but Maya had heard variations of it many times before. She forced herself to keep her expression neutral, even though she felt a familiar mix of hurt and frustration building in her chest. "I'm not trying to be mean," Robert continued, apparently noticing Maya's reaction. "I just think we need to be realistic about what this presentation requires. The Meridian executives are going to ask complex questions about market segmentation, competitive positioning, and implementation timelines. They're going to want to discuss ROI projections and integration strategies." Tom nodded in agreement, his earlier suggestion apparently forgotten. "Robert's right. This isn't like setting up a conference room or ordering lunch. We're talking about presenting to C-level executives who probably know more about marketing than most of us do." Maya felt herself shrinking back into her chair as a conversation continued around her. She understood that they weren't trying to be cruel, but their dismissal felt personal nonetheless. These were people she had worked with for 3 years, people she had helped countless times with tasks big and small. Yet when faced with a real crisis, they couldn't imagine that she might have something valuable to offer. "What about bringing in someone from our Chicago office?" suggested Lisa. "They might have account executives who could step in." David considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "The Chicago team doesn't know the Meridian account. And even if we could get someone here by this afternoon, they'd be walking into the presentation completely cold." The room fell silent again as everyone contemplated their dwindling options. Maya could see the defeat starting to settle on people's faces. David had stopped pacing and was now sitting heavily in his chair, staring at the table. Jennifer was checking her phone repeatedly, as if hoping for a miracle message that would solve their problem. "Maybe we should just call Meridian and explain the situation," David said finally. "We could ask for a postponement and hope they're understanding about medical emergencies." "But what if they're not?" asked Robert. "What if they see this as unprofessional or unreliable? We've been competing against 2 other agencies for this contract. If we postpone, we're basically handing them an advantage." Maya found herself thinking about the Meridian executives who had invested time and money in flying to the city for this meeting. She thought about all the work that had gone into preparing for this moment, and about how disappointed everyone at Sterling would be if they lost this opportunity without even trying. As the discussion continued, Maya realized that she was actually angry. Not at Olivia for getting sick, which wasn't anyone's fault, but at the assumption that she couldn't possibly contribute to solving this problem. She had spent weeks immersed in the Meridian materials, reading every document, organizing every piece of research, and listening to every strategy discussion. She had developed a deep understanding of Meridian's business challenges and had even identified some important issues that seemed to be missing from the original presentation. "What if we tried a team presentation approach?" suggested Tom. "Multiple people could handle different sections, and we could brief each other on the key points." "That could work," said Jennifer, sounding more hopeful. Robert could handle the creative strategy. Lisa could cover the competitive analysis, and Tom could discuss implementation. But as they began to discuss this option in more detail, the problems became obvious. The presentation had been designed as a cohesive narrative, with each section building on the previous one. Breaking it apart would make it disjointed and confusing. Plus, none of them had the depth of knowledge needed to handle detailed questions about specific aspects of the strategy. "This is hopeless," muttered David. "We're going to have to cancel and hope that Meridian gives us another chance." Maya felt. Something shift inside her as she watched the resigned expressions around the table. These were smart, capable people who had built successful careers in marketing and advertising. But right now, they were so focused on what they thought was impossible that they couldn't see what might actually be possible. Actually, Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The room didn't seem to hear her. The conversation continued, with people discussing how to word the cancellation message to Meridian and whether they should offer any kind of compensation for the executive's travel expenses. Actually, Maya said again, a little louder this time. Jennifer looked over at her. What is it, Maya? Maya took a deep breath, feeling every eye in the room turn toward her. Her heart was pounding and she could feel her palms getting sweaty. But she also felt something else, a sense of clarity that surprised her. I think I could do the presentation, she said. The room went completely silent. Maya could hear the air conditioning humming and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Nobody moved or spoke for what felt like an eternity. Then Robert laughed. Not the kind of laugh that indicated amusement, but the kind that suggested he thought he had misheard something. I'm sorry, what did you say? Maya felt her cheeks burning, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. I said I think I could do the presentation. I know the material, I understand the strategy, and I've identified some additional research that might be helpful. Tom looked genuinely confused. Maya, this isn't like giving a presentation to the office staff. These are senior executives from a major corporation. They're going to ask incredibly detailed questions about market analysis and strategic implementation. I know, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. I've been thinking about those questions for weeks. I've read all the research, reviewed all the client communications, and studied their annual reports. I've also found some information that I think is missing from the current presentation. The room erupted in a mix of surprised murmurs and skeptical comments. Maya could see people exchanging glances that seemed to say, "Is she serious?" She felt exposed and vulnerable, but also strangely determined. David held up his hand for silence. Maya, I appreciate your willingness to help, but we need to be realistic about what this presentation requires. The Meridian executives are expecting to work with senior-level strategic thinkers, not— He paused, clearly struggling to find a diplomatic way to finish his sentence. Not the administrative assistant, Maya finished for him. I understand that, but right now, I might be your only option. And I honestly believe I can do this. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could feel her heart pounding as she waited for someone to respond. Part of her wanted to take back her words and retreat to the safety of her supporting role. But another part of her, a part that had been growing stronger during her years of quiet observation, refused to back down. Finally, David spoke. Maya, I admire your confidence, but this is $1 million decision. If this presentation goes wrong, it could damage Sterling's reputation permanently. Are you really prepared to take that responsibility? Maya's declaration that she was prepared to take responsibility hung in the air like smoke after a firecracker. The conference room was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. David Sterling stared at her with an expression that mixed surprise, concern, and what might have been a tiny spark of curiosity. Maya, Jennifer said gently, leaning forward in her chair, I think we all appreciate your willingness to help, but maybe you don't fully understand what this presentation involves. The Meridian executives aren't just looking for a summary of our research. They want strategic insights, competitive analysis, and detailed implementation plans. Maya nodded slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's skeptical stares. She had expected this reaction, but experiencing it was still difficult. I do understand what it involves, she said quietly. And I think there might be some important things missing from the current presentation. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What do you mean missing? Olivia and I spent weeks developing that strategy. We covered every major aspect of Meridian's marketing challenges. This was the moment Maya had been both dreading and anticipating. She reached into the folder she had brought to the meeting and pulled out a small stack of papers. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I've been following Meridian's situation very closely," she began. "Not just because I was organizing the materials, but because I was genuinely curious about their business. I read their annual reports, their press releases, and articles about their industry, and I noticed something that I think might be important." She looked around the room and saw that she had everyone's attention, even if some people still looked skeptical. 3 weeks ago, Meridian announced that they were facing unexpected challenges with their main supplier in Southeast Asia. This is affecting their production timeline for their new product line, which means their original marketing schedule might need to be completely revised. Tom frowned. "I didn't see anything about supply chain issues in the briefing materials." "That's because it happened after Olivia finalized the presentation strategy," Maya continued, feeling more confident as she spoke. "But it's a big deal. Their new product launch, which was supposed to happen in the spring, is now delayed until late summer. That changes everything about their marketing timeline and budget allocation." Jennifer looked genuinely surprised. "How did you find out about this?" "I set up Google Alerts for Meridian Industries when we first started working on this project," Maya explained. "I wanted to stay current on any news that might affect our strategy." Most of the alerts were just routine press releases, but this supply chain announcement was buried in a trade publication that I don't think many people saw. David leaned forward, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. "What else did you find?" Maya felt a surge of nervous excitement. This was the first time in 3 years that David Sterling was asking for her strategic input, and she didn't want to waste the opportunity. "Well, there's also the issue with their main competitor, Harrison Manufacturing. 2 months ago, Harrison launched a marketing campaign that directly targets the same customer base that Meridian is trying to reach. Our current strategy doesn't really address how Meridian should differentiate themselves from this new competitive pressure." She pulled out another sheet of paper from her folder. "I also noticed that Meridian's customer satisfaction scores have been declining in their traditional markets. Based on the patterns I saw in their customer service data, I think there might be an opportunity to position their new products as solutions to the problems that their existing customers are experiencing." The room was completely silent now, but it was a different kind of silence than before. People were actually listening to what Maya had to say, rather than waiting for her to finish so they could move on to more serious discussion. Robert cleared his throat. "Where exactly did you get access to their customer satisfaction data?" "It was in their quarterly investor report," Maya said. "Page 47. They're required to disclose certain customer metrics to shareholders, and I thought it might be useful to understand how their customers really feel about their current products and services." Lisa looked impressed despite herself. "I have to admit, I didn't read through their entire investor report. That's pretty thorough research." Maya felt a small surge of confidence, but she also knew she was walking a delicate line. She didn't want to make it seem like she was criticizing the work that had already been done, but she also wanted to demonstrate that she had valuable insights to contribute. "The other thing I noticed," she continued, "is that Meridian's executives have been making comments in industry interviews about wanting to move beyond their traditional customer base. They're specifically interested in reaching younger consumers and international markets. But our current presentation focuses mainly on strengthening their position with existing customers." David was now taking notes on his phone, which Maya took as an encouraging sign. "What would you recommend instead?" This was the question Maya had been preparing for, even though she had never expected to be asked it in a room full of senior executives. "I think we need to address the immediate challenge of the delayed product launch, but also position it as an opportunity rather than a setback. The extra time could be used to develop a more sophisticated marketing strategy that addresses both the competitive pressure from Harrison and Meridian's goals for market expansion." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I've also been researching successful marketing strategies used by other manufacturing companies that faced similar challenges. There are some interesting case studies that might be relevant to Meridian's situation? Tom looked genuinely curious now. What kind of case studies? Maya pulled out the last sheet from her folder. There's a company called Precision Tools that faced almost identical challenges 2 years ago. They had a delayed product launch, increased competition, and declining satisfaction in their traditional markets. They used the delay as an opportunity to completely rethink their brand positioning, and it ended up being one of their most successful product launches ever. How did they do it? Asked Jennifer. They shifted their messaging from focusing on product features to focusing on customer outcomes, Maya explained. Instead of talking about technical specifications, they talked about how their products would solve specific problems that their customers were experiencing. They also used the extra time to develop partnerships with influencers in their industry, which helped them reach new customer segments. Maya could see that people were beginning to view her differently. The skeptical expressions were being replaced by genuine interest and even surprise. But she also knew that having good insights was different from being able to present them effectively to a room full of corporate executives. David put down his phone and looked directly at Maya. These are actually some very valuable observations. I'm impressed that you took the initiative to do this additional research. Thank you, Maya said, feeling both proud and nervous. But, David continued, having good insights is only part of what this presentation requires. The Meridian executives are going to ask tough questions about implementation, budgets, and timelines. They're going to want to see detailed analysis and professional quality visual presentations. This isn't just about sharing ideas, it's about convincing them that we can execute on those ideas. Maya nodded. I understand that. And I've actually been thinking about those implementation details too. She reached into her folder one more time and pulled out a small notebook that was filled with her handwritten notes. I've been working on some ideas for how to integrate these insights into a comprehensive strategy. I know it's not as polished as what Olivia prepared, but I think the basic framework could work. Robert looked at the notebook with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. You've been developing your own strategic framework? Not exactly, Maya said quickly. More like taking notes and thinking through how all the pieces might fit together. I didn't want to overstep my role, but I was genuinely interested in the project, so I kept thinking about it even after work hours. Jennifer exchanged a glance with David. Maya, would you be willing to show us what you've been working on? Maya felt her heart rate spike again. It's not very professional looking. It's just notes and ideas, not a real presentation. That's okay, said David. At this point, we're more interested in the substance than the formatting. Maya opened her notebook with trembling fingers. The pages were covered with diagrams, bullet points, and arrows connecting different ideas. It looked chaotic compared to Olivia's sleek presentation slides, but it represented weeks of careful thinking and analysis. Well, she began, looking down at her notes, I was thinking that we could structure the presentation around 3 main themes. First, turning the supply chain delay into a strategic advantage. Second, differentiating from Harrison Manufacturing through customer-focused positioning. And third, using this project as a launching pad for Meridian's expansion into new markets. As Maya began to explain her ideas in more detail, she noticed that the atmosphere in the room was shifting. People were leaning forward, asking follow-up questions and taking notes. David Sterling looked at his watch and then back at Maya, his expression a mixture of desperation and cautious hope. Maya, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Under normal circumstances, I would never ask someone in your position to handle a presentation of this magnitude. But we're out of options, and frankly, your insights are better than anything else we have right now. Maya felt her stomach flip as the reality of the situation hit her. In less than 2 hours, she would be standing in front of executives from one of the biggest potential clients Sterling had ever pursued. These weren't friendly colleagues who knew her and might be forgiving of mistakes. These were strangers who had traveled across the country expecting to see a polished, professional presentation that could justify $1 million investment. Here's what we're going to do, David continued, standing up and moving into crisis management mode. Maya, you have exactly 90 minutes to put together a presentation. Jennifer, I want you to work with her on organizing the content and making sure we have backup plans for every possible technical issue. Robert, can you help with the visual design and make sure the slides look professional? Robert nodded, though. Maya could see he still looked uncertain about the entire plan. I can probably adapt some of Olivia's existing slide templates and incorporate Maya's new research points. What about questions? Asked Lisa. The Meridian executives are going to ask detailed questions about implementation timelines, budget, allocations, and performance metrics. How do we prepare for that? David thought for a moment. We'll have to prepare Maya as much as possible in the time we have, and then position the rest of the team as subject matter experts who can support her during the Q&A session. It's not ideal, but it's better than canceling entirely. As the meeting broke up and people scattered to their various tasks, Maya felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. For 3 years, she had dreamed of having an opportunity like this. But in her imagination, she had always had weeks or months to prepare. Now, she had less time than most people spent eating lunch. Jennifer walked with Maya back to her desk, talking rapidly about logistics. First, we need to get your notes into a proper presentation format. Then we need to practice your delivery and think through potential questions. We also need to prepare talking points for the implementation, details and budget considerations. Maya sat down at her computer and opened a new presentation file, her hands shaking slightly as she began typing. She had watched Olivia create dozens of presentations over the years, but she had never created one herself that was intended for external clients. Every decision felt monumentally important: which font to use, how to organize the information, what colors would look most professional. Don't overthink the design right now, Jennifer advised, reading Maya's anxiety. Focus on getting your ideas organized clearly. Robert can help polish the visual elements once we have the content structured. Maya began translating her handwritten notes into digital slides, trying to create a logical flow that would tell a compelling story about Meridian's opportunities and challenges. As she worked, she realized that having to organize her thoughts for presentation was actually helping her refine and strengthen her ideas. Meanwhile, Robert had pulled up Olivia's original presentation on his computer and was identifying which elements could be repurposed or updated with Maya's new insights. Some of this research is still valuable, he said, reviewing the slides. We just need to reframe it in light of the supply chain issues and competitive changes you identified. Tom had taken on the task of researching potential questions the Meridian executives might ask based on similar presentations he had been part of in the past. They're definitely going to want to know about ROI projections, he said, making notes on his tablet. And they'll probably ask about how quickly they can expect to see results from any new marketing initiatives. As Maya worked on her presentation, she found herself falling into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. The insights she had been developing over weeks of research began to coalesce into a coherent strategic narrative. She realized that her unique perspective, combining administrative knowledge of the company's operations with detailed research into Meridian's situation, was actually giving her a more complete understanding of the project than anyone else in the room had, but creating the presentation was only half the challenge. Maya had never presented to corporate executives before, and she knew that her delivery would be just as important as her content. Jennifer had arranged for her to practice in the small conference room, using the same projection system that would be used for the actual presentation. Remember, confidence is key, Jennifer coached as Maya ran through her first practice session. Even if you're nervous inside, try to project authority and expertise. These executives need to believe that you understand their business and can help solve their problems. Maya's first run-through was rough. She stumbled over words, lost her place in the presentation, and spoke too quickly when she got nervous. But Jennifer was patient and encouraging, offering specific suggestions for improvement. Slow down when you get to the key points, Jennifer advised. Give them time to absorb what you're saying. And make eye contact with different people around the room, Don't just stare at the screen or read from your notes. Robert joined them for the second practice session, and Maya could see that his skepticism was gradually being replaced by cautious optimism. Your insights about the supply chain delay are really strong, he said. That's the kind of strategic thinking that executive teams appreciate. You're identifying problems they might not have fully considered and proposing solutions that could actually work. As Maya practiced, she began to feel more comfortable with the material and more confident in her delivery. She realized that she actually understood the content better than she had initially thought, because she had been thinking about it from multiple angles for weeks. Tom had prepared a list of potential questions, and they spent time practicing Maya's responses. Some of the questions were straightforward, but others required her to think on her feet and apply her knowledge in new ways. What if they ask about the budget implications of delaying the product launch? Tom asked. Maya thought for a moment. I would explain that while delays typically increase costs, this particular delay creates an opportunity to reallocate marketing budget toward more targeted research and relationship building. Instead of rushing to market with a broad campaign, they can invest in understanding their customers better and developing more effective messaging. Jennifer nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking they want to hear. You're taking a potential negative and reframing it as a competitive advantage. As they continued practicing, Maya noticed that her colleagues were beginning to treat her differently. They were asking for her opinions on strategy questions and genuinely listening to her responses. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was being seen as a strategic contributor rather than just administrative support. But the clock was still ticking, and Maya could feel the pressure building as the presentation time approached. She had improved significantly during the practice sessions, but she still felt unprepared for the intensity of presenting to executives who held Sterling's future in their hands. What if I mess this up? Maya asked Jennifer during a brief break. What if I freeze up or can't answer their questions? This could destroy Sterling's reputation and cost everyone their jobs. Jennifer looked at her seriously. Maya, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. In the 3 years you've worked here, I've watched you handle countless crises and solve problems that other people couldn't figure out. You have good instincts, you work incredibly hard, and you genuinely care about getting things right. Those are exactly the qualities that make for successful presentations. She paused and smiled. Besides, at this point, you're our only option. So instead of worrying about what might go wrong, focus on what you can control. You know the material? You understand Meridian's challenges, and you have valuable solutions to offer. Trust yourself. As Maya put the finishing touches on her presentation slides, she realized that this moment represented more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to prove to herself and others that she was capable of much more than anyone had imagined. The question was whether she could summon the courage and confidence to seize that opportunity when it mattered most. With 30 minutes left before the Meridian executives arrived, Maya took a deep breath and prepared to step into a role she had never played before, but for which she had been unknowingly preparing for 3 years. At exactly 2 p.m., Maya heard the elevator doors open down the hallway, followed by the sound of confident footsteps and professional voices. Her heart immediately started racing as she realized that the Meridian executives had arrived. Through the glass conference room walls, she could see David Sterling walking toward the elevator to greet them. His smile bright, but his shoulders tense with nervous energy. Maya looked down at her presentation notes one final time, though she had already memorized every key point. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she could feel sweat beginning to form on her palms despite the office air conditioning. Jennifer noticed her nervousness and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Remember what we practiced? Jennifer whispered. Start strong, make eye contact, and trust your research. You know this material better than anyone else in the building. Right now. Through the conference room window, Maya watched as David led 3 executives down the hallway. The Meridian team looked exactly like what she had expected, professionally dressed, carrying leather portfolios, and walking with the confident stride of people who were used to making million-dollar decisions. The woman leading the group appeared to be in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the Sterling office. Behind her were two men, one younger and one older, both carrying themselves with the quiet authority of senior business leaders. Maya felt a wave of panic wash over her. These weren't friendly colleagues who might overlook a stumbled word or a nervous pause. These were strangers who had flown across the country specifically to evaluate Sterling's capabilities. They had probably sat through dozens of similar presentations from other agencies, and they would immediately notice if she seemed unprepared or unprofessional. David entered the conference room with the Meridian team, making introductions and offering coffee. Maya stood up, trying to project the same confidence she had practiced, but her voice came out slightly higher than normal when she shook hands with each executive. "I'm Maya Chun," she said, immediately regretting that her name came out sounding more like a question than a statement. "I'll be presenting Sterling's strategic recommendations for your marketing initiative." The lead executive, who introduced herself as Patricia Williams, Chief Marketing Officer of Meridian Industries, gave Maya a polite but evaluating look. "It's nice to meet you, Maya. I was expecting to work with Olivia Kane today. Is she joining us?" David smoothly stepped in to explain Olivia's sudden illness, positioning Maya as a senior strategic analyst who had been deeply involved in developing the presentation. Maya appreciated that he didn't mention her actual job title, though she felt guilty about the implied deception. As everyone settled into their chairs around the conference table, Maya felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She could see Robert and Tom sitting along the side wall, ready to support her during the question and answer session, but she knew that the next hour would depend almost entirely on her ability to deliver. "Before we begin," said the younger Meridian executive, who had introduced himself as Michael Torres, Director of Strategic Planning, "could you give us a brief overview of your background and experience with industrial marketing?" Maya's throat went dry. This was exactly the kind of question she had feared, because it highlighted the gap between her actual experience and the role she was trying to fill. But she had prepared for this moment, and she forced herself to answer honestly while emphasizing her relevant knowledge. "I've been with Sterling for 3 years, working closely with our industrial accounts and developing deep expertise in manufacturing sector marketing challenges," she said, which was technically true even if it didn't capture the full picture of her administrative role. "For this project specifically, I've spent the past several weeks immersed in research about Meridian's business, your industry dynamics, and the competitive landscape you're navigating." Patricia nodded approvingly. "We appreciate thorough preparation. Please, go ahead with your presentation." Maya clicked to her first slide and took a deep breath. "Thank you for making time to meet with us today. I know you're evaluating multiple agencies for this project, and I want to show you why Sterling understands your challenges better than anyone else, and how we can help you turn a recent setback into a significant competitive advantage." She had practiced this opening line dozens of times, and it came out smoothly and confidently. She noticed that all 3 Meridian executives were paying close attention, which gave her a small boost of confidence. "3 weeks ago," Meridian announced, "supply chain delays that will push your new product launch from spring to late summer." Maya continued, clicking to a slide that showed a timeline. "Most agencies would probably see this as a problem to work around, but we see it as an opportunity that could actually strengthen your market position." Michael leaned forward slightly, clearly interested. "How so?" Maya felt a surge of excitement as she realized she had their attention. "Because during those same 3 weeks, your main competitor Harrison Manufacturing launched an aggressive marketing campaign targeting exactly the same customers you're trying to reach. If you had launched on your original timeline, you would have been fighting for attention in a crowded marketplace. But now you have time to develop a more sophisticated response." She clicked to the next slide, which showed a comparison of marketing messages from Meridian and Harrison. Harrison's campaign focuses on product features and technical specifications. It's exactly what most manufacturing companies do, and it's not very memorable. But our research into your customer satisfaction data suggests that your clients are actually more concerned with outcomes than features? Patricia looked genuinely surprised. You've reviewed our customer satisfaction data? Yes, from your quarterly investor reports, Maya explained. Page 47 of your most recent filing shows declining satisfaction scores in traditional markets. But the detailed comments suggest that customers aren't unhappy with your products themselves. They're frustrated with how long it takes to see results and how difficult it is to measure the impact of their purchases. The third executive, James Rodriguez, VP of Operations, was now taking notes on his tablet. That's a very perceptive analysis. What do you recommend we do with that insight? Maya felt her confidence growing as she moved into the heart of her presentation. Instead of competing with Harrison on technical specifications, we recommend positioning Meridian as the outcomes-focused choice. Rather than talking about what your products do, we talk about what your products achieve for customers. She clicked through several slides showing examples of outcome-focused messaging, case studies from similar companies, and specific recommendations for Meridian's campaign. As she presented each point, she noticed that the Meridian executives were becoming more engaged, asking follow-up questions and taking detailed notes. This is a fundamentally different approach from what Harrison is doing, Maya continued. While they're talking about features, you'll be talking about results. While they're focused on products, you'll be focused on partnerships. It's a way to differentiate yourself that goes beyond just price or specifications. Michael raised his hand. This sounds interesting in theory, but how would it work practically? What would the actual marketing materials look like? Maya had anticipated this question and had prepared specific examples. She clicked to a slide showing mock-up advertisements and marketing materials that demonstrated the outcome-focused approach. Instead of saying our new system processes 30% faster, we would say get your products to market 3 weeks earlier. Instead of advanced quality control features, we say reduce customer complaints by half. Patricia was nodding approvingly. That's much more compelling from a customer perspective. But what about the supply chain delays? How do we address the fact that we're launching later than originally planned? This was the moment Maya had been most nervous about, because it required her to present a completely new strategic framework that she had developed largely on her own. Actually, we think the delay creates an opportunity for something we call anticipation marketing, she said, clicking to a slide that outlined this concept. Instead of apologizing for the delay, we position it as deliberate preparation. We tell the story of a company that cares so much about delivering perfect results that they're willing to take extra time to get everything right. We use the delay period to build relationships with potential customers, understand their specific needs, and create customized solutions. James looked intrigued. Can you give us a specific example of how that would work? Maya smiled, feeling completely in her element now. Absolutely. During the delay period, instead of just waiting, we recommend launching a future partner program. You identify 50 key prospects and offer them exclusive early access to your product development process. They get to provide input on features, participate in beta testing, and receive custom training before the official launch. She clicked to a detailed slide showing how this program would work. By the time you officially launch, you don't just have a product, you have 50 companies that helped create it and are already committed to buying it. You turn the delay from a liability into a competitive advantage. The conference room felt different after Maya finished her presentation. The air seemed lighter somehow, and she could see the tension that had gripped everyone's faces since morning beginning to ease. Patricia Williams was flipping through her notes, occasionally nodding to herself, while Michael Torres was quietly discussing something with James Rodriguez in voices too low for Maya to hear. Maya stood at the front of the room, her presentation remote still in her hand, trying to read the expressions of the 3 executives who held Sterling's future in their decisions. Her heart was still beating fast, but it was a different kind of nervousness now. The anticipation of waiting for a verdict rather than the terror of performance. David Sterling cleared his throat gently. Patricia, Michael, James, do you have any additional questions for our team, or would you like some time to discuss what you've heard? Patricia looked up from her notes and smiled, the first genuinely warm smile Maya had seen from her since the executives had arrived. Actually, David, I think we've heard everything we need to hear. And I have to say, this presentation was significantly more insightful than what we've seen from the other agencies we've been considering. Maya felt her knees go weak with relief, but she tried to maintain her professional composure. She glanced over at Robert and Tom, who were both grinning broadly. Clearly, as surprised as she was by how well everything had gone, Michael leaned forward in his chair. Maya, I'm particularly impressed by your analysis of our supply chain situation. Most consultants would have just worked around that challenge, but you found a way to turn it into a strategic advantage. That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Thank you, managed to say, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. She still couldn't quite believe that she was having this conversation with senior executives who were praising her. Strategic insights. James pulled out his phone and began typing. I'm sending a message to our CEO right now to let him know we've found the right agency for this project. Maya, would you be available to serve as our primary point of contact throughout the campaign? The question hung in the air like a challenge that Maya wasn't sure she was ready to accept. She looked at David, wondering if this was the moment when he would politely explain that she wasn't actually qualified to manage major client relationships, but David surprised her. Maya has been instrumental in developing this strategy, he said smoothly. I think she would be an excellent choice to lead the Meridian account. Patricia was already reaching for her briefcase, pulling out what looked like contract documents. Excellent. We'd like to move forward immediately. The timeline you outlined for the anticipation marketing campaign is perfect, and we're excited to get started on the Future Partner Program. Maya watched in amazement as Patricia signed the contracts right there at the conference table. 3 hours earlier, she had been filing invoices and answering phones. Now she was watching a $1 million deal being finalized based on a presentation she had created and delivered. As the Meridian executives prepared to leave, Patricia walked over to Maya and extended her hand. I want you to know that this was one of the best strategic presentations I've seen in my 15 years in marketing. You have a real talent for understanding business challenges and developing creative solutions. Thank you so much, Maya replied, shaking Patricia's hand and trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just happened. I'm looking forward to working with your team. After the Meridian executives left, the Sterling conference room erupted in celebration. David was practically beaming as he shook Maya's hand, and even Robert, who had been the most skeptical about her abilities, was congratulating her on the successful presentation. Maya, that was absolutely incredible, Jennifer said, her voice filled with genuine pride. I knew you were capable of more than your current role, but even I didn't expect you to handle that presentation so professionally. Tom was already on his phone, apparently calling other team members to share the news. Wait until everyone hears about this, he said excitedly. Maya just closed the biggest deal in Sterling's history. But it was David's reaction that meant the most to Maya. He pulled her aside as the celebration continued around them, his expression serious but pleased. Maya, I owe you an apology. For 3 years, I've been completely blind to your potential. You've been sitting right under our noses with strategic insights and business acumen that rivals anyone on our senior team. Maya felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you, David. That really means a lot. More than that, David continued. I want to offer you a promotion immediately. Senior account executive with a salary increase of 40% and equity participation in the company. You've earned it, and frankly, we can't afford to waste your talents any longer. The promotion offer felt surreal. Maya had dreamed of advancing at Sterling for 3 years, but she had never imagined that it would happen so dramatically or so. Quickly, I don't know what to say, she managed. Say yes, David replied with a grin. And then get ready to work harder than you've ever worked before, because the Meridian account is just the beginning. After what I saw today, I want you involved in every major strategic initiative we undertake. Over the following weeks, Maya's life at Sterling transformed completely. Her small desk in the corner was replaced with an office on the executive floor, complete with the view of the city skyline that she had always admired from a distance. The administrative tasks that had filled her days were redistributed to other team members, and Maya found herself attending strategy meetings, client calls, and planning sessions that she had previously only heard about secondhand. The Meridian campaign became a case study in successful crisis management and strategic innovation. The Future Partner program that Maya had suggested exceeded all expectations, generating advance commitments for nearly double the original sales projections. Industry publications wrote articles about Meridian's brilliant anticipation marketing strategy, and Sterling received inquiries from potential clients who wanted to work with the agency that had developed such innovative solutions. But perhaps the most significant change was in how Maya's colleagues treated her. The people who had previously seen her as helpful but unremarkable now sought out her opinions on strategic questions and included her in high-level discussions about the company's future direction. She was no longer invisible in meetings or overlooked when important decisions were being made. 3 months after the Meridian presentation, Maya was promoted again, this time to Director of Strategic Innovation. Her role involved identifying emerging opportunities for Sterling's clients and developing creative solutions to complex business challenges. It was exactly the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, but had never believed she would have the chance to pursue. The most rewarding part of Maya's transformation, however, was the opportunity to mentor other employees who might be overlooked or underestimated. She made a point of paying attention to administrative assistants, junior staff members, and anyone else who seemed to have potential that wasn't being recognized. She remembered what it felt like to have good ideas that no one wanted to hear, and she was determined to make sure that other talented people didn't have to wait 3 years for their moment to shine. One afternoon, almost 6 months after the Meridian presentation, Maya was reviewing strategy documents for a new client when she received an unexpected visitor. Olivia Kane, who had returned to Sterling after recovering from her illness, knocked on Maya's office door. "Do you have a minute?" Olivia asked, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Of course," Maya replied, gesturing for Olivia to sit down. Olivia settled into the chair across from Maya's desk and was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally, "for the way I treated you when we were working together. I was so focused on my own success that I never took the time to recognize your contributions or see your potential." Maya was surprised by the apology, but she appreciated its sincerity. "Thank you for saying that, Olivia. I know you weren't trying to be dismissive. We were all just playing the roles we thought we were supposed to play." "Maybe," Olivia said, "but that's no excuse for not treating people with the respect they deserve. What you accomplished with the Meridian presentation was extraordinary, and it's made me think differently about how I interact with everyone on our team." As Olivia left her office, Maya reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. 6 months earlier, she had been struggling to get anyone to take her ideas seriously. Now she was leading one of Sterling's most successful accounts and helping to shape the company's strategic direction. But the most important change wasn't in her title or salary or office location. It was in her understanding of her own capabilities and worth. Maya had learned that talent and intelligence can exist anywhere in an organization, and that the most valuable insights often come from unexpected sources. She had also learned that sometimes the biggest opportunities arise from the most difficult circumstances, and that being prepared for your moment is more important than waiting for permission to seize it. As Maya looked out her office window at the city skyline, she smiled at the thought of